What's up, mi gente? We're here with the incredibly talented David Bianchi. Not only is he a producer, a writer, an actor, but he's an overall visionary. Welcome, David. How are you?
Elijah, encantado. Yo, big shout out to all the Latinos out there. Shout out to the Latin community. Estamos aquí.
Now, speaking of the Latin community, you've been in LA for what, almost 20 years, a little over 20 years now?
Casi 21, papá.
Wow, that's like the Latino community has grown so much, especially the Afro-Latino community in LA. Talk to me about when you first moved here, having to find that community of Afro-Latinos here.
You know, it's when I first moved to LA, and I graduated from theater school in 2004. So I got here about 05. So 20 and a half years ago. And when I got here, it was hard because being, ethnically ambiguous, it wasn't a cool thing in Hollywood. Because Hollywood, from a progress perspective, hadn't gotten beyond white, black, Latino, Asian. Like those were the casting categories. So to be, Afro-Latino wasn't really a popular thing. Like the category Latinx didn't even really pop up until maybe at most 8 years ago?
Yeah.
At most. And even in the casting perspective, like that moniker hasn't really been tossed around, right? The ambiguous Latino. And so for me, it was really challenging to get cast. And so that's where my producing career started. I started producing short films with whatever $400 or $500 that I had. And then my first project was a project called Soldier that I did in LA. And it was a piece told entirely in spoken word poetry because my community was in the open mics and I'm a spoken word poet. And so that's where I found the Afro-Latinos that I actually came across was in the spoken word scene because, obviously they're like the Nuyorican Cafe in New York. So there was a lot of influence from what was happening in the Nuyorican Cafe and what was happening in the slam rooms in Hollywood. So that's where I really found my community and producing things that I could act in was a side effect of Hollywood not having open doors for Latinos of Afro descent.
Now, growing up, did you see yourself represented on film and TV?
I mean, sure. I mean, I grew up, watching. I mean, the only black folks that were really like on TV at the time was pretty much like the Cosby Family. You know what I mean? I'm definitely dating myself. But there just weren't. Malcolm Jamal Warner is still a dear friend of mine, and I grew up watching him. But as far as Afro-Latinos were concerned, there were none. Especially in America.
At all.
At all. I mean, even in Brazil, Central America, like even if you look at any novelas for the most part, even today, throughout all of the Latino nations, the vast majority of Latino soap opera stars are still of Euro-colonialistic descent.
And it's up to producers to kind of change that. And you being a producer yourself, you also produced raves, I understand, right?
Yeah.
So I want to know all about that and like where that visionary came from, but also how it has developed to who you are today when you produce film and TV shows.
Yeah, I mean, it's life is a journey, and I never know what plans God has for me. I couldn't have imagined that back then that I would be producing film and TV at the level that I'm at right now. But flashing back to upstate New York, I went to my first rave. I was a hip hop cat, like b-boy breakdancer. And I went to my first rave in Toronto and I was blown away. I went to this like 72-hour rave and it was like 15,000 people in a warehouse.
Wow.
And it was bananas. And I'll never forget what happened. I was dancing like crazy and I was on way too many drugs. And I like slammed into some dude. He was like this big, like yoked Asian guy. And with the hip hop mindset, my first instinct was like, yo, I was ready to fight.
Yeah.
And he had his shirt off and he was all buff, like he was like an Asian Schwarzenegger. You know what I mean? And he put his hand on my shoulder and he looked at me and he said, bro, it's okay. And it's just like this joy washed over me. And then for the first time, I realized that thousands of people could get together and dance and party and not fight. Because in the hip hop scene, especially during like the Pac and the Biggie days in the East Coast, West Coast rivalry, it was a fist fight at every hip hop party you went to. That was just the nature of the culture. And so when I discovered that, and then I saw the lights and I saw the argon lasers and the sound and how they turned this huge warehouse into a spectacle, I saw the money and the possibility. And I was like, okay, I gotta figure out how to do this. But the most important thing for me was peace, love, unity, and respect. That was the code of the rave scene back then. And so I went back to upstate New York to Rochester and I like convinced all my friends to like clear out 3 acres of land by hand with hatchets.
Wow.
And then I produced my first rave. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anything about house, trance, drum and bass, techno, the genres and whatnot. But the idea of taking something from nothing to fruition, I just enjoyed that process, right? And so, unbeknownst to me, I did that for about 8 years in upstate New York before I went to theater school, and I abandoned that because as an entrepreneur, you can win, but you don't always win. In 2001, I produced a big event and I lost my ass.
Wow.
But to your question, for 8 years, I was taking barren spaces and turning them into electronic music spectacles.
Wow.
And so I was teaching myself how to produce film without knowing I was doing that. Because now when you fast forward to producing film, take this soundstage, for example. How do you turn this into a production? I need talent, which means I got to deal with agents and I got to deal with contracts, transportation, logistics, and legalese. Okay, now I need grip, I need electric, I need power, I need logistics, I need permits. These are all the things that you need to produce a rave.
Yep.
You know, I need security, I need manpower, I need to know how to deal with staff and how to project manage, right? And how to motivate people to get something done for no money. And so all those lessons that came in producing these electronic events are the same lessons that I employ even today when I produce film and TV.
That's amazing. But like when you talked about theater, what made you want to go to theater school?
Well, I had always been, I remember in third grade, we used to act out TV commercials on the swing set.
Yeah.
You know, so you would sit down and we would improv a commercial and then we would switch. And so I was doing improv before I knew what improv was. And I moved to Mexico City when I was young. And that's where I fluently learned to speak Spanish because I'm from Brazil. And I'll never forget it. I don't remember the teacher's name, but I was cast as Captain Hook in Peter Pan. And I want to thank that teacher, if you're watching this, wherever you are, for doing that, because during this time, this is like late 80s. And at the time, you know, Captain Hook is notoriously a white character.
Yeah.
He's not a skinny brown kid, you know what I mean, in third grade with charisma, right? So this Caucasian teacher saw something in me and said, of all the other students, is no, we're gonna paint a mustache on this skinny brown kid, put a hook on his hand and a hat, and we're gonna make him Captain Hook.
Wow. And
And that put me on stage in front of 100 people in elementary school. And I really believe that maybe if that hadn't happened, maybe there would have been a piece of me that wouldn't have maybe gained the courage to continue to do this. Because I kept doing theater through middle school and then high school when I got back to upstate New York.
Yeah.
I kept doing that. And so, you know, I was always a class clown. Like, you know, I was a troublemaker. I got expelled from 6 high schools, dog. Like, I was a bad kid. I was a terror. And but those theatrics always remained with me. I was always the guy that was loud and acting out. But when it came to theater school, despite losing my business as a rave promoter, and despite having been kicked out of so many schools, when I finally made the conscious choice to go to theater school, I got my GED in the local strip mall, and I ended up packing everything up, and I went to Arizona State University, got in on academic probation because my GPA was 0, and I ended up passing the first few classes with a 4.0, and I graduated from Arizona State University magna cum laude at the top of my class.
Congrats. That's big.
Right, and so when I think about that macro, I was clearly in a place where I was in my purpose.
Yeah.
Because I knew I didn't want to fail, and I still carry that with me.
Now that's beautiful when you understand the purpose of what you're doing from the grand scheme of things and the big scope of things. As a producer, you go back and you talk about that Asian guy who had the muscles. Being a producer, being able to cast and put people together that normally wouldn't be put together. Because like you said, your teacher, she cast the brown guy as Captain Hook, which normally it's the Caucasian guy. You being able to be the producer and kind of bring any type of diaspora together. What is that like for you?
One of the things that Tyler Perry says is that he says, I want to help people cross. And that's something that has really sat with me. And I really believe it's such a powerful statement to help people cross the bridge, get to the other side of the riverbank. And that's the thing that I've tried to do and continue to try to do through all my years of producing, is whether I'm hiring people of different diasporas or whether I'm producing content that is socially conscious. I consider myself an artivist. So whether I'm doing it through the stories that I'm telling or through the people that I employ, that stuff means a lot to me because I needed people to help me cross when I was a waiter for 15 years and a bartender in Hollywood, barely making ends meet, when I was, every single week I was in Check Advance America because I was getting paycheck advances against my bartender check because I couldn't afford to live, you know? So when I was doing extra work for 3 years just to get my SAG card, just to be close to TV and film, I needed people to help me cross. And I can tell you countless stories of people that have opened their hearts to me because of the opportunities that I've been able to provide for them. Even on one of my latest projects, Razor, we'll talk about that soon, I ended up getting 14 people that were non-union to join the Screen Actors Guild.
Wow.
4 extras, background players became principal players, 4 stuntmen became principal players, 60% of my heads of department are women,
Wow.
and 91% BIPOC cast. And I was at the rap party and I had a guy, Senor Peña, he came up to me, and a grown-ass man, you know, he came up to me, man, he put his arms around me and he's just like, bro, I just gotta tell you, man, you changed my life. He's like, I joined the Screen Actors Guild because of what you created and provided. And I know how powerful that feeling is, because I'll never forget. I remember the day when I got my SAG card, when I looked at that thing and I felt like I was part of something major. I'm now a member of the biggest union of performers in the world. I'm in the same union as Tom Cruise and Morgan Freeman. Let's go. You know, like that feeling of joy in crossing that bridge. It's a feeling that is unforgettable, and it literally is life-defining for the artist. And so many people have given of their time freely to advise me, to consult with me, to point me in the right direction. I would be shirking those relationships, and I would be abusing my ancestry if I didn't do the same.
And when you look back at those times where you were a bartender and you were an extra, at that time, did you appreciate the journey, or did you hate the struggle? Because you know, there's some people, they're like, I'm appreciating this journey because I know eventually everything will work out. But there's others who have the, you know, idea of giving up. Did that ever cross your mind?
I've always tried to be comfortable with where I'm sitting. You know, when I first came to LA, there was never a part of me that said I was not going to be an award-winning actor, a major award-winning actor. There was never a part of me that believed that I wouldn't make it, right? And so it's just like making a film. A lot of people get daunted by the process of taking something from idea to pencil to script to screen. Because you look at the A to the Z, it's the rest of the fucking letters in between that are really daunting.
Yeah.
That's a big alphabet you got to get through.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just like, if I say I'm going to make a movie, I'm not going to not make a movie. Whatever happens in the in-betweens is just all part of the course. And so knowing that I am still on my way to becoming a major award-winning actor, this is all just part of the course, right? There are peaks and there are troughs in life, regardless of what you do. Whether you're an accountant, whether you're an attorney, whether you are a garbage man or an entrepreneur, you're gonna have peaks and valleys. Life is not always in harvest. The entrepreneurial life is not for everyone. It just isn't. And if you're an actor or a filmmaker or a producer or an art director, production designer, cinematographer, you're an entrepreneur unto yourself. And sometimes understanding of craft isn't enough. You've got to have the chops and the gumption to get yourself up every single day and fire to the best of your ability with everything that you have, because otherwise you just won't make it.
No, that's so true. And speaking of chops, you had the chops from 2017 when you first started Catalyst to 2025. It's a long process. But I want to know from the beginning of that whole process, where it started, where the idea came from, and obviously, you know, getting the cast together. And there was a lot of improv, I understand, going on there. I want to know all about that.
I mean, you know, it lends to what I was just describing, that like, if you say you're going to make a movie, don't not make a movie, right? And the lesson in that is, we often say that you're only as good as your last project. People in Hollywood at the independent level want to know that you're a finisher. If I'm going to ask someone to come in and work independently on a movie for like a $250,000 budget or a $200,000 or $100,000, or even $1 million budget, you're still paying people significantly less than what their union, you know, their worker union rates are, what they're actually worth.
Yeah.
So they want to believe that the producer behind this project is not only going to complete a great project, but it's going to complete. Yeah. No one wants to be a part of anything that ain't going to get finished. Yeah. You know? And that's why I take it with a very level brow when I say yes to someone, right? Because I know what that means, right? If we think about confidence, confidence is the side effect of experience, right? Experience is a side effect of the inner drive. The inner drive is a side effect of inspiration. Inspiration is a side effect of your perception of the world. So when I get to the place of confidence, I understand what it means to produce a film. So when my friend Chris Fulkins invited me to produce this project Catalyst, and I had just gotten done producing a feature called All Out Dysfunction, I was beaten. You know, because this was a movie I produced for like less than 100 grand. I did everything.
Yeah.
You know, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm dragging juicy bags out of the back of a 10-foot cube truck because I'm the producer. The producer stops, buck stops with me. If I don't do it, who's gonna cuss me out at the location? The location owner, right? No one's gonna deal with that but me. And so I looked at him, I said, okay, after some griping, I finally agreed to do it because we were gonna do something exciting. And we started shooting that in 2017. We started ideating it in 2016. And our first day of photography in June of 2017, I called up all my boys on my phone and I was like, look, I got this thing that we're gonna do and it's gonna be really wild. So I wrote you this backstory and this is your character, this is your archetype. It's like a 1,000-word backstory. But I want you to then decide, where did you lose your virginity? Are you an alcoholic? Were you abused by your father? Where were you raised? Do you have a short temper? Understand your guy inside and out. Because we produced one day with 3 cameras, an over-the-shoulder, a slider, and a steady cam. And we shot 7.5 hours, one full 13-hour production day, but we ended up with 7 hours of completely raw footage of entirely improvised dialogue with 0 rehearsal.
Wow.
With audio playback, video projection. So it was controlled improvisation, but none of it was scripted.
Yeah.
So we all made up the words on the spot. And you know, the cast is incredibly diverse. It's me, Noel G, Melanie Liebert, who's, you know, Afro-British, and then we've got Michael Rourke, who's a Caucasian guy, and then we've got Usman Khan, who is Middle Eastern, and then Patrick Kilpatrick as well, and Jermaine Love, Afro-Brit as well. So it's a very diverse cast as well.
Now you talk about the improv in that, and it was 7 hours the whole day, 8 hours.
It was a 14-hour day,
Wow.
but 7 hours on camera.
So doing that as an actor, like, talk to me about the difficulties of that, because you're improvising for all those hours. Like, do you think that your theater, like, school helped you with that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was by far the most intense improvisation exercise I've ever done in my career. And I've never done anything even more intense since then. So yeah, I think definitely my training, my being classically trained, it helped that. But at the core of it, it was just 7 men in a room in a pressure cooker going to war. Because in the script, we have every reason to hate each other. Yeah. But if we attack each other, we're shocked because we're wearing shock collars around our necks and we're treated like dogs, right? So when you can't attack someone, you're forced to communicate. And so as a result of that, we had to just go as hard as we could and we couldn't break character. Wow. By the end of the day, my voice was gone. I was hoarse. I felt physically defeated, but I never felt so accomplished in my life. The feeling of that day carried me for months. I knew we had something special. I didn't know what it was going to turn into. And nobody did at that point, even my director, Christopher Fulkins. So we took 7 hours of raw footage and he expertly cut it together to about 50-something minutes. And then we started writing the screenplay that was informed by the improvisation.
That's beautiful. Now you have this love and adoration for a dystopian universe, because with Razor as well. Talk to me about Razor and like how that whole concept came about.
Yeah, Razor is an alternative dystopia in Los Angeles that takes you into the world of neural implants, hacker culture, cryptocurrency, and black market crime. It's super gritty, super dark. It's like Mr. Robot meets cyberpunk with notes of Blade Runner on it. And you know, when I think about why I produce dark stuff, is I produce stuff that I believe I would want to watch. Right? So the movies that inspire me are Children of Men, you know, Blade Runner 2049, the original Blade Runner. You know, if I look at beyond sci-fi, I think about, you know, a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson films, early Quentin Tarantino films, for example. These are movies that really, really inspire me. Movies like Old Boy are, I mean, you know, these are great films that are gritty, existentialists, but focus on the languages of cinema. And that's where I come from. I'm an artist. I'm an artist first. Right? I'm always an artist first. And so if we can express the languages of cinema and do it in an interesting, grounded way, that's what I want to tap into.
That's a big deal. Now you've come such a long way and you have so much more to accomplish. Where do you see your career going from now?
I don't know what God wills for me, brother. You know, if I look back and tell my, you know, 20-year younger self that this was going to take 20 years, I probably would have been like, hell no. I'm going back to school, listening to mom and getting an MBA and a 401k, forget all this. So I don't know, man, life is what happens while you're making plans. I believe that as long as I continue to do my best and try to be as decent as a person as I can be, that God, the universe, and everything will care for me. I'd like to believe that at some point soon, I will be on the biggest stages, earning the biggest awards in film and television. I'd like to believe that I will continue to, produce at a very high level and hopefully be afforded the opportunity, because none of this is guaranteed. I'm gifted with the opportunity to do this, regardless of how hard I work. No one has to believe in me. No one has to cut me a check, So I'd like to believe that I'd like to leave a body of work here that will be discussed in 2070.
David, this has been absolutely amazing, but I want the people to know where they can follow you on all of your social media so they can keep up with your journey.
Yeah, David Bianchi _official on Instagram, David Bianchi on X. I don't know what my LinkedIn is, but I have one. Yeah, just Google. I'm usually pretty easy to find. I try to be accessible and I try to answer DMs.
David, this has been such an amazing and inspiring interview. And congratulations, not only on being sober, but just everything you've accomplished so far and will accomplish in the future. So I appreciate you.
Listen, I appreciate you, and thank you so much for your time and your support and your attention. And, big shout out to LatiNation. We're in the building, yo.
Hey.
Hey, Afro-Latinos estamos aquí, eh?